Welcome to my channel. The best thing about going to my wife's company event was getting to drive my Challenger. The downside was that the faster I drove, the sooner I arrived. The party was at the company's lodge, and there was a smooth 30-kilometer stretch of road leading up to it. No stops, no lights, no traffic, just open road waiting for the Challenger to show its power. It also meant no gas stations or stores along the way. Donna and I had been growing distant since our daughters got married. I had hoped it would bring us closer, but that didn't happen. Donna insisted I join her at this event, even though I'd made it clear I didn't want to go. She usually attended these alone. Donna enjoyed drinking, while I didn't. I might have a beer occasionally. She was outgoing, while I kept to myself. For about a year, I'd suspected she was seeing someone else, but by that point, I didn't much care. I think that's partly why we had grown apart. I was just biding my time, looking for a way to end our marriage. I'll admit that I might be the reason my wife sought something different. I'm a bit of an odd minimalist. Growing up poor with my brothers, we had far less than other kids. No bikes, no pets, no trendy gadgets. It was almost like living Amish minus the religion. I understood how the typical world functioned, but it just didn't appeal to me. I knew how important it was to avoid debt, pay bills, and save for retirement. To live simply, you don't need to be extreme, just disciplined. Allowing yourself a few small luxuries helps you seem normal to others. For me, marriage and family were my biggest indulgences. It had been hard finding a woman who could tolerate my quirks and appreciate my uniqueness. Donna came from a similar background, used to a modest life. She didn't embrace it fully, but she tolerated it. Over the years, she seemed to adapt, meaning she became less frugal, more typical. I didn't like it, but accepted it, especially after the girls were born. To avoid standing out too much, we bought a modest house and started dressing a bit nicer. Donna would get her hair done occasionally and became skilled at makeup. We even bought last year's model smartphones. When our daughters grew up, Donna took a low-paying office job and needed a car, so we bought her a small Honda, just like mine. Her paycheck mostly covered the car expenses, lunches, and work clothes. It wasn't much, but it was fine by me. I'm William Smith, a name about as common as they come. I work as an assembler at a local company that makes industrial compressors. The work is repetitive, but I enjoy it. It suits me. Though I was occasionally offered promotions, I always turned them down. I never told Donna about my second indulgence, which was something I kept private from her. I believed in saving for retirement, so whenever I could, I bought a gold Krugerrand. I had over 30 of them tucked away in a safe in our basement, and I was only getting started. My last indulgence was my 1970 Challenger, which I inherited from my older brother John, who passed away working on an offshore oil rig. I could afford to maintain it myself, but the insurance costs were steep. Donna was doing well at her job at Gilbert, regularly receiving raises and promotions. During her first year, she talked a lot about her work, but then she became quieter about it, rarely mentioning anything about her job or colleagues. I suspected something was off, but I couldn't figure out what. I hoped I'd get some answers tonight. The company gathering was a sort of retreat, a weekend event. I felt uncomfortable about going. I'd met her coworkers before, and I didn't care for any of them. We turned off the main highway in Holbrook, and I finally had the chance to let the Challenger fly. The car responded just as I'd hoped. Donna looked uneasy with the speed, but kept quiet. Yes, I was pushing the speed limit, and no, I didn't care. "Bill, what's the hurry? We've got plenty of time," she said. "Why not slow down a bit?" "I'm in no rush to get there. You know I didn't want to go at all. I'm just giving the car a chance to stretch its legs. Please don't spoil my mood." "This weekend is important for my career," Donna said. "Mrs. Simpson insisted it was important for you to be there too." Mrs. Simpson was the wife of Glenn Robertson Simpson, the company's president. Old money and old-fashioned business. "And why exactly does it matter if I attend this company thing?" I asked. "It's necessary for you to understand my new role at work so you can support me in my career," she replied. "I still don't see the point. I've always supported you. Why is this different?" "In my new role, there are certain unique responsibilities. Marge said you should be introduced to them gradually so you fully understand. It might be difficult for you to grasp at first, but she assured me you'll be thrilled." By the time we arrived at the lodge, my adrenaline was high. It didn't take a genius to see what Donna was hinting at. The weekend was shaping up to be interesting. Donna walked into the lodge, leaving me with the bags. I felt put in my place. "Nice wheels, Mr. Smith. Is that a 70 or 71? That was Toby Wallace, a young employee at the company. "Hey, Toby, it's a 70, I replied. He introduced me to his wife, Bonnie, who was sitting with him on the front porch, though it looked like everyone else was inside. I glanced around the parking lot, counting about 16 cars and one old, beat-up truck at the far end. The next 5 minutes were spent talking about the Challenger. "What are you doing out here?" "Why aren't you and Bonnie inside with everyone else?" I asked. "They're not exactly our kind of people, Mr. Smith. We planned to leave earlier, but Mrs. Simpson insisted we stay. We were up early today to help set up, and the caterers left about an hour ago," Toby explained. "You'll need to fill me in. Something about this feels off, though I can't put my finger on it." "I don't want to worry you, but I think it may have something to do with your wife. Are you staying the whole weekend?" "No, I parked my truck on the roadside to make leaving easier." Every moment, things were getting more intriguing. "Well, I'd better get these bags to our room. Let me know if you're leaving, okay?" "Of course, Mr. Smith. Be careful, don't do anything reckless." Luckily, we only had 2 small carry-ons. When I stepped inside, Mrs. Simpson noticed me, smiled, and waved. Upstairs, Donna waited, looking a bit annoyed at how long I'd taken to come in. "You're just in time, Bill. We have a few hours to get ready for the evening, freshen up, and put on something appropriate. It's a special night, and I want everything to go perfectly. If you don't mind, I'll take a walk around the lodge to clear my head. I'll be back shortly." I noticed myself smirking slightly as I left. The air was brisk, which made the walk more refreshing. I'd guessed correctly that there were about 16 cars, mostly Mercedes, a few Jaguars, and a couple of Lexuses. 4 cars had out-of-state plates. I couldn't understand how Donna, in her role, could blend in with people of this level. Or rather, she were clearly out of our league. Something didn't sit right. I saw Toby and Bonnie loading their bags into their truck, so I waved and walked over for a quick chat. "Looks like Mrs. Simpson's letting you go." "Not exactly," Toby replied. "We're sort of sneaking out. I feel uncomfortable here, Mr. Smith." Toby thought we should stay, but I convinced him otherwise. Bonnie quickly added, "Could you do me a favor and stick around until after the evening reception? I'm uneasy too, and would appreciate it. I don't know what's happening, but I don't like it." "Great minds think alike, don't they, Bonnie?" I joked, and she blushed at my lame attempt at humor. "I think we can manage that," I said, starting to feel a liking for Toby. I dressed up as Donna requested before we went to the buffet. Our hostess took me by the hand, leading me to a quieter corner. "We're so glad you're here tonight to support Donna. This is a big step for her career, and she needs your full support. The pay and benefits increase is substantial, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with it. Forgive me, but could you clarify what this is about? Donna's been vague and keeps telling me to wait for tonight." "Oh, there's nothing to worry about, William. I think she just wants to surprise you." "That doesn't really answer my question." "There isn't an official title. I suppose you could say she's a personal assistant," Marge replied. "I see. Well, the buffet looks amazing. Thanks for explaining." "Please call me Marge." For the next hour, I sampled the buffet. Donna was busy socializing with her higher-ups, which gave me a chance to spend more time with Toby and Bonnie. Just as we were finishing, Mrs. Simpson approached us. "William, Donna mentioned you brought your little sports car tonight. Would you mind running an errand for us while we have a few drinks?" she asked. I smiled and nodded. "There are 3 cases of wine at the store in Holbrook, already paid for. All you need to do is pick them up. It should be easy, but if there are any issues, just give me a call. And make sure you take your phone." "I'd be happy to help, Marge. I'll let Donna know and head out." As she walked away, I glanced over at Toby. "Meet me outside in 5 minutes." Donna just smiled when I told her Mrs. Simpson had asked for my help. "Don't forget your phone," she reminded me, funny enough echoing Marge's concern. "Toby, I need a favor," I said, tossing him the keys to the Challenger. "Are you serious?" he asked, grinning. "Yes, take it to Holbrook and pick up the 3 wine cases for Mrs. Simpson. I have a hunch there might be a bit of a delay if you get my drift." Toby smiled knowingly and nodded. "Here's my phone. Leave it on the dashboard. If it rings, don't answer it, and whatever you do, don't turn it off. Any questions?" "How long should we stay away?" "Make it at least 2 hours, and top off the tank before heading back to the lodge. Enjoy yourselves." It was chilly outside, but at least I had worn a comfortable jacket. Now all I had to do was wait. From various spots on the back porch I could see most of the lodge's interior. A thermos of coffee would have been nice, but I hadn't thought that far ahead. I found a good spot where I could watch without being seen. Donna seemed to be the center of attention, though I still didn't know exactly why. She was smiling, laughing, and mingling like a star. Around 20 minutes later, Mrs. Simpson and Donna both glanced at Donna's phone. I knew they were checking my location. Thanks to Toby, it looked like I was nearly in Holbrook. They both exchanged smiles, and Mrs. Simpson raised her hand and began speaking. Although I couldn't hear her, it seemed like everyone in the room approved as I heard soft applause. Glenn Robertson Simpson then approached Donna, took her hand, and they started up the main staircase. At the top, he raised their hands like a victory salute, and both of them laughed as murmurs of approval filled the room. I still had about an hour and a half before the Challenger would return, so I decided to take my time and have a bit of fun. I always carried my reliable buck folding knife, a gift from my daughters about a decade ago. It had high-quality steel and a sharp blade. I scanned my surroundings and decided to start with the cars parked closest to the lodge. There was no rush. Carefully, I unscrewed each valve stem cap and pocketed them so I wouldn't leave anything behind or make a mess on the Simpsons' driveway. 16 cars, 64 valve stem caps, and I still had nearly an hour left. What to do next? There wasn't much else I could think of. 4 cars were locked, but the rest were open, so I went back to the one closest to the lodge and pulled out the registration papers. Some were tucked behind sun visors, though most were in the glove compartments. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them yet, but I figured they might come in handy at some point. Since I still had another half hour before Toby would return, I decided to remove the valve stems from the spare tires as well. With access to the cars, I also had access to the trunks. About 20 minutes later, I had collected an additional 10 valve stem caps. 2 cars didn't have spare tires. It was a petty, even childish move, but it gave me a small sense of satisfaction. Confrontation wasn't my style, so I preferred to go about things quietly. I didn't have any self-esteem issues and didn't feel the need to act tough or heroic. I left that to the alpha types. 20 minutes later, the Challenger returned, and Toby and Bonnie seemed to have enjoyed the ride. Toby confirmed there was a delay at the store, just as I'd suspected, and it appeared to have been planned ahead of time. While they were out, I hadn't received any calls on my mobile, so I powered it down and removed the SIM card. Toby and Bonnie were eager to get back home, so I thanked Toby, wished him the best, and strongly advised him to find another job quickly. The wine was probably very pricey, but that problem was easily resolved. I simply left all 3 cases on the lodge's porch. I didn't want to give them any reason to accuse me of stealing. The drive back home was relaxing. There wasn't much left at the house that mattered to me beyond a few personal documents, my laptop, and my Krugerrands. Initially, I'd considered setting the house on fire before leaving, but that would have made Donna look like a martyr, and I wanted to avoid that. I stayed on the road for about 2 hours, not feeling the need to leave a goodbye note or even my wedding ring. Let her figure it out on her own. I had no specific destination and was in no rush. I drove around for 2 days. By Monday morning, I called my workplace to let them know I was quitting and asked them to send my final paycheck to my parents' home in Carlisle. They were unhappy with me leaving without notice, but I apologized without offering an explanation. There's nothing like a good breakfast at a diner along the way. I picked up a local classified paper and saw an ad for a night stalker position at a nearby supermarket. They needed someone to stock shelves from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. After eating, I stopped by the store, which was in a unique old neighborhood in Chattanooga. I spent the next hour driving around, noticing plenty of craftsman-style houses and a few mobile homes nearby. I would have been fine with a small trailer, but I hoped for something a bit better. Then I saw a sign for an apartment above a garage. The garage wasn't part of the rental, but when I offered an extra $50 a month, they agreed to include it. The apartment was small, with 1 bedroom and a half bath, but it was furnished with a bed, dresser, table, and chairs. The rent was reasonable, and the location was convenient, so I took it. I'd deal with the bathroom issue later. At least I had a place for the Challenger. The situation at the supermarket was a bit different. They had plenty of applicants, but not enough they trusted to leave alone overnight. I explained my circumstances to the owner, who made the decision to hire me when I offered to work behind closed doors without benefits and for $1 less than they were planning to pay. They didn't even ask for my Social Security number. They were satisfied, and so was I. It was only a 10-minute walk from the apartment. I spent the rest of the day settling into my new place. The landlord provided me with the Wi-Fi access code, which was a nice gesture. After a quick trip to the mall, I returned with some kitchen supplies and a small microwave, as well as bedding and cleaning items. That evening, I canceled my life insurance policies. I didn't bother with bank accounts or credit cards. How could that possibly harm her? Our daughters were married now, which made leaving a bit easier. No grandchildren yet, but I'm sure that would change soon enough. I called my daughter Laura to let her know I was okay and asked her to be ready to help her mother if needed. Laura knew I had left, but Donna hadn't told her much else. She promised to inform her sister Linda. I deleted any calls from my wife and powered off the phone again. I could use a shower maybe tomorrow. Not everything was perfect. I still needed a safe place for my gold. It may not seem like much to others, but it was important to me. I ended up getting a safety deposit box in Huntsville, Alabama. I hoped it wouldn't be easy to trace it back to me in Chattanooga. Of course, I was probably wrong, but at least I felt like I tried. It was a 2-hour drive, but I didn't mind. The garage door at the apartment was secure, but I added a heavy-duty lock and a new latch just to be certain my car was safe. It didn't take long to settle into my new job. For the first 3 nights, I worked with someone else. After that, they left me to work alone. My responsibilities didn't include the grocery or meat sections. The biggest challenge was handling the frozen food area. After the first 2 weeks, I had the routine down. For a $20 initiation fee and $10 a month, I got a gym membership, which took care of my shower needs. The drawback was that I had to use a credit card, which led to another trip to Huntsville to get a card from my new bank. I was beginning to realize how tough it was to fully disconnect from the system. Adjustments had to be made. I wasn't sure how hard Donna would try to find me or if she'd even bother at all. If it came up, I'd handle it then. Before long, I settled into a routine. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. It was a 20-minute jog or a 30-minute walk to the gym. Originally, I'd joined just for the shower, but over time, I started using the other equipment too. By the end of the first month, I was working out for nearly 2 hours each day. I felt healthier and even lost a little weight. I never thought of myself as overweight, but I had gotten out of shape. It felt good to get back into a rhythm. I was comfortable in my new job and enjoyed it. The work was repetitive, but somehow varied. It's hard to explain, but I'm sure you understand. I did my work without interference, and the gym turned out to be a good choice too. Soon enough, I figured out which exercises suited me and which ones didn't. Lifting heavy weights didn't interest me, and since I jogged to the gym every day, I skipped the treadmills. I started each session with a circuit workout that took around 30 minutes, followed by 20 minutes on the rowing machine, another 20 on the stepper, and finished with 20 minutes on the upright bike. I never ended up getting a TV, but I did buy a used desktop computer with a decent monitor, and most of my daily entertainment came from watching YouTube videos. Although I rarely cooked, I noticed a slight change in my eating habits. I found myself leaning toward a keto diet without trying, and with my odd work schedule, I was naturally following a bit of intermittent fasting. After 3 months, I was feeling healthier and had shed a few pounds, so I figured it was time to call my daughters. This time I phoned Linda. "Hey Linda, it's your dad. About time. We've all been worried about you. Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm doing well, don't worry. I just wanted to check on how your mom's doing." "Mom's fine. She recently got promoted and loves her job. But she's pretty angry with you. She said you walked out on her at her promotion party and then just left, acting like an immature boy." Those were her words. She said you were envious of her success. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't have anything else to say until she tells you what actually happened. She did mention things have been a bit tight without your income, but with the promotion she's managing. Glad to hear it. Did she mention anything specific about her new job? Just that she's earning more and has to travel frequently. I didn't reply, and after a pause, Linda asked, "Will you be home for Christmas?" I don't think so. I'll try to send something for you and Lara. We don't need or want anything, Dad. We'd rather have you here. Sorry about that. I have to go now. Say hi to Lara for me. Bye. I hung up, feeling a little down. My daughter seemed to misunderstand the situation and believed I was responsible for everything going wrong. It wasn't what I wanted, but I didn't feel the need to explain myself. From what Linda said, it sounded like Donna was doing just fine without me. I still didn't understand why she wanted me at home. I finished a case of Black and Tan and spent the weekend feeling low. My beer intake was increasing and I started slipping into a rut. Weeks went by, but things eventually got better. I was doing well at work and unexpectedly received a promotion. They gave me complete freedom with my responsibilities, and soon I streamlined and improved the restocking process. I provided a weekly report that helped them manage inventory and reorder schedules, which the store's computer already handled, but they seemed to appreciate the personal input. My living setup was ideal, affordable, and my weight had dropped as I started building muscle. With the right lighting, I could even see the beginnings of a six-pack on my stomach. I stopped shaving and grew my hair long enough for a small ponytail. My appearance changed, giving me a slightly intimidating look. My workouts at the gym were getting easier and I spent a little more time on them. An unexpected outcome was making a few acquaintances at the gym. They weren't exactly friends, just familiar faces. I stayed cautious around the female regulars, not wanting any misunderstandings. With the guys, I relaxed and joined in the usual joking. One unusual connection did form. Her name was Harry, or at least that's what everyone called her. She wasn't particularly sociable and rarely spoke to anyone, but she made an exception with me. Every morning she'd work out for at least 2 hours, doing intense exercises rather than flashy routines. I guess she was around 45 with a tough look, always in sweatpants and a hoodie. While other women flaunted tight, revealing outfits, Harry kept it simple. I got teased a bit since I was the only guy she'd talk to or even look at. I didn't encourage her, but I didn't discourage her either. Truthfully, I was a bit flattered. Several months passed without me reaching out to my daughters or wife. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I made a few trips to Huntsville to add more Krugerrands to my collection. Then things started to shift. "William, can I speak with you for a minute?" This wasn't how Harry usually started a conversation, and she even called me William. Everyone else used Bill. I realized she'd never called me by name before. Of course, what's up? Need some help with something? As a matter of fact, yes, we sat down on a bench to talk. I have an event on Friday night and I need a date. I'll handle all the costs. All I need is for you to accompany me. I noticed you don't drive, so I can also cover transportation if needed. I hesitated, and she noticed immediately. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked. "No, not at all. It's just that. Well, I have a few complications. If you can work around them, I'd be glad to help." "Okay, what's the issue?" "For starters, I'm married." "Oh, really? You never mentioned a wife. Is that the main issue?" "No, not really. I just thought you should know. I haven't seen or spoken to her in over 9 months. I'm not even sure if we're still together." "Have you filed for a divorce or separation?" "No." "Anything else?" "I don't own anything suitable for an event. No suit, no jacket, no dress shirts, not even formal shoes." "That's fine, I can take care of that. That's why I'm asking a week in advance. I work nights, but I think I can manage to rest in the evening." "Glad we're sorting this out," she said with a smile. "Anything else?" "Should I shave?" "I like your beard and hair, but you're a bit scruffy. Would you mind if my stylist took a look at you Friday afternoon?" "Stylist," I groaned as she smiled, but I nodded in agreement. And so my relationship with Harry, professionally known as Harriet Parker, an attorney, began. On Tuesday, I found myself at JSA Banks. Not exactly a high-end store, but a step up from where I'd ever shopped. Harry had arranged everything in advance. I left with 2 pairs of trousers and 2 sports jackets, plus a couple of shirts and some ties. I also added 2 mandarin collar shirts to the pile. I'd always liked them and thought they'd work well with the jackets. Harry had paid for everything ahead of time. On my way back, I picked up a decent pair of shoes and some new underwear. I needed new underwear since I'd recently lost weight, and I also picked up some loafers that were stylish but comfortable. My Friday visit to the stylist went smoothly. The guy who worked on me was laid back and did a fantastic job. He trimmed my beard short and styled my ponytail into a sort of modified braid, though I'm not exactly sure what it's called. He said it would be easier to maintain, and I liked the outcome. He didn't mention much about Harry, but he did say I was fortunate. Harry pulled up to my apartment at 6 p.m. sharp, honking briefly instead of getting out of the car. Her Lexus looked out of place in the neighborhood. I wore a gray jacket with a matching turtleneck and thought I looked decent, though I didn't have much basis for comparison. I was grateful she was driving, as I didn't know the city well. "Harry, before we leave, can you clarify what I'm supposed to do or avoid doing tonight?" "The first hour will probably involve mingling. You don't need to join in much. Most people there will be pretentious types you won't want to deal with. Just stick close to me and keep other women from approaching. Blend in. But don't let anyone push you around. Make sure I always have a drink in hand, either ginger ale or mineral water. Be polite and calm, and no matter what, don't lose your cool. Essentially, you're my arm candy. Make it look like we're together." I've never thought of myself as that type of guy. I'm not used to this sort of thing. Do you think I'll manage? "Sure, you'll be fine. Oh, and is there any food?" About an hour in, we'll each get a $500 plate of overcooked chicken. Then a few speeches will start, followed by some gift giving. "By the way, you look good." That's when I realized I hadn't said anything about her dress or hairstyle. I was definitely out of my depth. The first part of the evening went exactly as Harry had predicted, and my role turned out to be easier than expected. The room was full of single men in pricey suits with oversized watches. Harry looked fantastic, and since most knew she was single, several tried striking up conversations with her. I noticed myself giving them a Charles Bronson-like squint, which surprisingly did the trick. Each time I went to refresh her drink, another guy would sidle up to her. Some brought her drinks, which she discreetly handed to me to dispose of. Occasionally, she'd glance at me and smile a little. Finally, we took our seats, and 300 plates of dry chicken appeared out of nowhere. I'm not a picky eater, but this was different. I kept thinking about the $500 cost. Harry leaned over a bit and whispered, "William, let's blow this place." She tried to mimic Humphrey Bogart, but it didn't quite work. Without a word, I stood, took her hand, and we slipped out without anyone noticing. Back at her garage, she kicked off her shoes and tossed me the car keys. "William, find us some real food." 20 minutes later, we were at Willie's Country BBQ with full plates and a couple of beers. She reached for the Tabasco sauce, and we both ignored the fries. The bibs they handed us were a welcome touch. As we ate, I noticed her dress had long sleeves, unusual for most evening gowns, which tend to be sleeveless or short-sleeved. She remained barefoot, seemingly unbothered by it. Life went back to normal after that. My evening with Harry was enjoyable, though it didn't lead to anything romantic. We continued with our gym routine. 3 weeks later, she had another event that required a date, and I agreed to go. I explained the situation to my boss, who found it amusing. He told me I didn't need formal time off and could just leave a note for him, letting me manage my hours independently. Harry's daily gym routine was intense. She kept her heart rate up and worked up a sweat each time, always dressed in hoodies and long pants, unlike the other women in sports bras and shorts. It was puzzling, but I didn't question it. Our second night out was similar to the first, though with more drinks and no food. The additional alcohol brought more men around, each with a fresh drink for her, which I'd collect and toss. One guy was particularly persistent, and I eventually pulled him aside to warn him that if he didn't leave my fiancée alone, I'd deal with him. He disappeared, and a few others followed suit. I hadn't realized how intimidating I'd become. After the event, we had sushi but ended up with $40 worth of sashimi instead. It was another fun, friendly evening. 2 days later, Harry caught me at the gym while I was on the rowing machine. "Why didn't you tell me we're engaged?" she laughed. A few colleagues were asking me about it yesterday. She didn't wait for a response and just smiled. I called my daughter, Laura. She told me Donna had been avoiding both her and Linda. All she knew was that Donna traveled frequently and people often stayed at her house. I asked if her mother had filed for divorce, but she didn't know. It had been weeks since she and Linda last spoke with her. Frustrated, I drank more than usual, and the next morning I sent 74 valve stems to Glenn Simpson at Gilbert Company in a flat rate box. I attached a short note, thanks for the lovely evening. Although it had been more than a year since that party I was sure he'd remember, I skipped the gym that day. I didn't feel like working out with a hangover. The following day, Harry gave me a grilling. I promised to explain everything next time we went out to dinner. She picked me up at 6 and took me to a steakhouse. It was my first time at a place like that, and I made an effort to dress up for her. She listened without judgment the entire night. I returned home just in time for my work shift. At the gym the next day, Harry had a question for me. Do you know anyone who was at that lodge that night? When I mentioned I had the names and addresses of everyone there, her eyes lit up. After our workout, she came to my place and I handed her an envelope containing 12 vehicle registration documents. She grabbed them and kissed me on the cheek. There are 15 types of lawyers, and Harry was a scandal attorney. She tried explaining it to me, but I just smiled and asked how much it would cost. She replied with another kiss on the cheek. 3 days later, my daughter Linda called. Donna had asked her if she knew where I was, as there was trouble at her work, and she was at the center of it. Donna was anxious to speak with me, but Linda refused to give her any information. I wondered if Glenn had received those valve stems. I called Harry and told her I'd be there to pick her up in 20 minutes. Her office was in a high-end shopping center. The car was impressive, but not too flashy. Harry had never actually seen my Challenger, as the topic hadn't come up before. The sound of the engine arriving drew some curious glances from people in her office. As she walked outside, I went over to open her door, and I noticed Harry's laugh as she got in. "Nicely done, William," she said, still smiling. "I suppose you'll be wanting an engagement ring now," I replied. "All in good time, no rush." I kept the Challenger at a modest speed until we crossed the Tennessee River, then started letting it open up a bit. Highway 72 on the way to Huntsville is a pleasant drive, though not ideal for speeding. We spent 2 hours at Dreamland. "William, everyone from that night at the lodge has been served," Harry informed me. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're all part of a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress," she said. "That's actually a real thing, yes," she explained. "Their behavior was deliberate, extreme, and caused you significant emotional harm that might explain why Donna was so upset," I thought as we each sat with a plate of ribs in front of us. Harry finished her last rib, looking up as she asked, "Why was your wife upset?" I explained that Linda had called me, mentioning Donna urgently wanted to talk, as there was a serious issue at her job, and she was involved in it. Glenn Simpson and Gilbert Company are facing a $1 million lawsuit. The other 11 people each have cases filed for $100,000. I hesitated, then asked, not to sound naive, "But is there a chance this will actually work?" She replied confidently, "It might be complicated, but I expect some interesting developments." I wanted another beer but avoided it due to the long drive. Harry, however, ordered one and seemed to enjoy it with a touch of smug satisfaction. As we were leaving, I felt a bit bold and casually suggested, "Why don't we get a room and head back in the morning?" She responded, "I'd like to, but it's not possible right now." I offered we could leave early if needed. She shook her head. "Let's just head back. I'll explain on the way." The first 20 minutes in the car were quiet. Then she shared her story. 8 years ago, she had weighed nearly 150 kilograms. Instead of opting for surgery, she went on a strict diet and started working out, shedding over 70 kilograms. However, it left her with about 10 kilograms of loose skin, and 5 surgeries were required to remove it. Now, scars covered much of her body, and she was self-conscious about them. She had avoided dating because of it, but felt comfortable around me without knowing exactly why. When I dropped her off at her house, I walked her to the door and gave her a light kiss on the cheek. She thanked me for the dinner, and as I turned to leave, I caught a small tear in her eye. We continued going on these platonic outings, which seemed to suit us both well. My supermarket was doing well with the locals. Within 2 years, they'd opened 2 more locations and were looking to expand. The owners were serious when they offered me a permanent position as inventory manager for all 3 stores. It required that I go completely legitimate, and I agreed it didn't seem as big a deal anymore. Harry was pleased, which made me happy too. A few more weeks went by and I hadn't heard from my daughters until one day I got a brief text saying, "Mom got fired, this complicated things." Now I had a steady job with a good salary and Donna was unemployed. I worried I might get pulled into a divorce after all. Then things took an unexpected turn. "William, for a change, I have good news," Harry said, her tone serious. "3 of the 11 people we sued have settled." "What does that mean?" I asked. Since the suits were each for $100,000, their insurance companies advised them to pay out to avoid a trial. It was covered by their insurance, so it wasn't a huge loss for them. "Are you saying we could actually make money from this, William?" she replied. "I've already received 3 checks. And there could be more? Do you think this is related to Donna losing her job?" "I'm almost certain it is." "Will this affect my divorce? Have you filed yet?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied. "I was hoping you could help with that." Harry gave me a broad smile. "William, pack a small bag and get the Challenger ready. We're taking a trip to see your wife. We leave early Thursday morning." I couldn't help but grin. We left at 6 a.m. and arrived at the Sheraton Hotel 10 hours later. The Challenger was content, and so was I. I called Linda and asked her to arrange lunch with Donna and Lara at the Reading Motor Inn the next day. Dinner that night was a bit tense, and selecting items from the Red Lobster menu turned into an enjoyable distraction as we ended up spending more than planned. But we didn't mind. It felt like a bit of a celebration. Our conversation covered various topics, carefully skirting the obvious subject. This was our first night together, and though we'd been friends for over a year, there'd been no benefits. I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. While I won't go into specifics, I can say that the night wasn't as nerve-wracking as expected. We both felt somewhat out of our depth, but we managed, and the outcome was what we had hoped for. She seemed reassured that I wasn't put off, and I was relieved that it wasn't nearly as awkward as she'd anticipated. In the morning, we had a late breakfast. When we arrived at the restaurant, Donna and my daughters were already seated. I wore a new sports coat over a dark turtleneck and felt good. Harry was dressed in one of her lighter business suits, striking the right balance between casual and professional. My wife and daughters looked at me in surprise. Donna, Linda, Laura said, "This is Harriet Parker, my confidante and attorney." Here's the fully paraphrased version of the text as you requested. "Harriet, this is my wife Donna and my daughters Linda and Lara." It was a tense introduction, but it was all I could manage. Before anyone could drift into uncomfortable small talk, the waiter arrived to ask for our drink orders. Donna was the first to break the silence. "I'm not hungry, so I'll just have coffee, if that's all right," she said. With a quick glance around the table, I could tell we were all on the same page. "How about bringing us 5 cups of coffee and leaving the pot?" I suggested. The waiter nodded, and everyone seemed to relax a little with this choice. "It's good to see you again," Donna started with a faint smirk. "Would you mind filling us in on what you've been up to lately?" "Just working and making sure you have the space to do whatever it is you need," I replied. Harry nudged me under the table, a subtle reminder to keep my composure. "You should have been there for me, but you left," Donna said, her tone sharp. "Maybe you needed support, but it wasn't going to be from me," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Dad, enough of this," Linda cut in, firm but calm. "I'm sure this meeting wasn't just arranged so you could throw insults back and forth." "Dad, why did you bring us all here?" I looked at her, feeling a bit out of my depth, then turned to Harry, who quickly took over. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table to Donna. "Mrs. Smith, this is a divorce settlement proposal. I believe it's quite fair. I recommend you have your lawyer look it over." Both Lara and Linda were visibly surprised. It was clear they hadn't expected this, but Donna didn't even look at the envelope. Instead, she smirked, reaching under the table to pull out a matching envelope from her own purse. "You fool, I divorced you for abandonment 8 months ago. You never got the papers because I had no address for you. It's final, so whatever you have there is meaningless. Besides, there's nothing you have that I want." Her smirk widened as she left both envelopes on the table. Just then, the waiter returned with our coffee in a fresh pot, right as Donna rose to leave. She gave Harry and me a wry smile, threw the girls a strange look, and walked out without a backward glance. After she'd gone, Lara turned to me. "Dad, can we stay for lunch?" I heard they have amazing custard pie here." Harry and I laughed, then asked the waiter to bring us menus. Harry, Laura, and Linda shared a pleasant lunch and good conversation, but I felt somewhat alone, lost in my thoughts. I've never truly understood women. By the end, the girls had exchanged numbers with Harry and promised to keep in touch. Back in our hotel room, I began to pack. "William, weren't we staying another night?" Harry asked. "We'll stay, just not here." "Let's get our things together." 90 minutes later, we were in Elkton, Maryland, and another 30 minutes after that, Harriet Parker became Harriet Smith. We spent the night in Luray, Virginia. I would have driven further, but we needed to stop. Now we have a house with a 3-car garage, but that's a story for another time. Later, the girls told me Donna was furious when she learned I'd received $2 million from the Gilbert settlement. Donna has since moved to Iowa, though I have no idea why. Thank you for staying with me through to the end. I'll see you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.